Welcome and happy back to business. I am thrilled to be here this morning with this team to talk about rock star jobs to kick off the day. I will ask that somebody give me some signal if we have any accidentally mute myself again, or you can't hear someone. That would be great. We're really excited for this conversation today, and I'm even more excited that we have some alumni of the Bryan School here to talk about these rock star jobs. And I'm going to introduce them in just a second. I want to cover what we are talking about as rock star jobs this morning. As was shared in the session description, the North Carolina Department of Commerce has published a report based on their business analysis of our community and the business outlook for the state. And in that report, which is their rock star, not rock, star jobs report, I added the rock star for Bryan Back to Business. They've indicated several careers, there are many of them on there, that have the greatest job and earning potential for the next 10 years here in North Carolina. And so these folks that are here joining us today work in those skill areas, and we're going to let them share their skills and background. And I just wanted to mention that Carrie East, who is going to be joining us, unfortunately cannot join this morning, but we'll get her involved in another conversation. And she was going to cover some details around marketing and the potential for those jobs and where she had come out of her marketing degree in the Bryan School. So we'll have opportunity to cover that at another time. But first things first, let me introduce these amazing alum who are here with us. And Ty's going to hang out, and Rob, they're going to hang out and make sure everything goes well with the webinar. But we're joined today by Andrew Kanji. He is a Bryan alum and is also the financial reporting manager for a company called Royce 2 here in the Triad. And I'm not going to go into much more detail. Financial manager is one of the hot jobs that they've indicated on that report. So I'm going to let him share a little bit about what he does and then sort of how he came to be in the role where he is now. But welcome, Andrew. We're so happy to have you this morning.
All right, thank you. So it's glad to be here. Glad to give you some insight about what my role is and how I really came to this role. So again, my name is Andrew Kanji. I'm the manager of financial planning and analysis, FP&A for Royce 2. And I was a graduate of UNCG in 2011 with a major in accounting and a minor in IT. And originally I'm from Malawi, Southern Africa. That's just a little highlight there. So what my role really entails is financial planning for an organization. So the way I got to this role is through both my accounting and IT background. So starting from graduating from UNCG, I joined a company called Carson DeLosa, and there I was an accountant, a staff accountant. So mainly dealing with the general ledger and transactions, accruals, all that, just hardcore accounting. And then after that, I moved to Ralph Lauren and I was a financial analyst in supply chain finance, and moved up to senior financial analyst there. And the same thing, supply chain finance, but mainly in e-com and specializing in North American e-com. And after that, I moved then to Royce 2, where I'm a manager of FP&A. So that's how it kind of goes. So you start with your core background in accounting and kind of build up to that and move on to being a financial analyst, which is now is a much needed role in multiple organizations. And you can specialize in different things as a financial analyst. Mainly I specialize in supply chain. And that was also one of the main factors too why I was hired at Royce 2, bringing in that knowledge. So I do also have a systems background. I do know how to program. And that does help me a lot in my role, because the future of finance is mainly geared towards IT and mainly geared towards machine learning. The previous, when I first started off in accounting, I mean, everything was paper-based. Now it's completely different. Now it's completely IT systems, databases, all that. So that's knowledge that you have to get to know nowadays.
That is excellent insight. And, it's something we're going to continue to talk about in this conversation. So the idea of being able to combine skill sets and how critical that is to your career. We'll talk a little bit about that and adding to what you've left the Bryan School with. Next, I'm going to introduce Monica Lewang. She is also a Bryan alum, and she is going to talk with us a little bit about operations. She works in the operations function for Lincoln Financial Group and is you know, really impactful in her career. And I want her to share, I'm not going to give away her details, but I want her to share, you know, where she is now. And as she left the Bryan School, you know, how she's learned in her current role. That would be great. Thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, Bramley. So again, my name is Monica Lung. I currently work at Lincoln Financial Group as a specialist is technically my role in HR, but I'm actually more of an application lead. So we have a new document repository system and working in a financial services company, lots of documents come through. So we're essentially trying to transition a lot of our paper and our electronic documentation into this new system. So I am pretty much the subject matter expert in terms of adoption and execution for other lines of business to transfer their things over to that system. I graduated from UNCG with my MBA in 2019 with a specialization in business analytics. So I'm very excited to be here.
Well, thank you so much. And there we see it again, the analytics IT part of business is coming up as well. So you guys obviously are in these areas. I'm going to read just kind of a very specific for those folks who are joining us on the webinar, the definition. Now, these definitions can be very broad, but financial managers, this is the definition that we're using: create financial reports, direct investment activities, and develop long-term plans for the financial goal of their organization. That's pretty broad. Like you were saying, Andrew, you have a specialty in supply chain that adds to your abilities in those areas. And then for operations analysts, I'm going to read this real quickly. Operation analysts use analytical methods to help organizations solve problems and implement better solutions. So I definitely think operations, obviously that Monica covers, better solutions is a great term. What I want to ask you is just sort of thinking generally about what these roles are. Monica, I'll ask you first. Did you know that you wanted to be in operations when you started your education? You were in your undergrad and your graduate. Did you know exactly what you wanted to do when you left school?
I absolutely did not know that I would be in this role when I started undergrad. I honestly didn't know at all what I was doing, and even up until my senior year. So it's kind of funny how I got here. So I actually worked in student affairs for the longest time, all the way up until I graduated my MBA. Actually, I had worked at Campus Rec all throughout my undergrad. I interned afterwards. I really wanted to get into recreation management and working in collegiate recreation specifically. And my boss was like, hey, you need a master's degree to work entry level at Campus Rec. And I was like, okay, I'll just pop over, get a master's degree, and I'll come back and hopefully you'll have a job for me. So I started my MBA at UNCG, and then I did one internship the summer before I graduated, and then they have these things called company spotlights. And I'll be completely honest, and Bramley knows this. She was like, hey, there's a company spotlight for Lincoln Financial Group. And I was like, I don't know if I want to work for, at first I was like, it's an insurance company, but it's much broader than that now that I've worked here for a few years. I was like, I don't want to work at some stiff insurance company. But she was like, no, we have an alumni here and he's speaking, so you should like get a chance to talk to him. So I spoke to him before the spotlight and after, and then actually my future boss, Mike, was there speaking, talking about Lincoln preparation program roles. And I was like, it's worth a shot. And I knew I was always in it as I need to work as quickly as possible and get ahead of the game, because I didn't have a business in as technical background in business per se. So I was like, I just need to get on top of this. So I had an interview and I ended up landing an internship for January through all the way up until my graduation date. And then they hired me full time right after I got back from my trip from Vietnam, which was so great. So like, I would say with that, just be open to different opportunities. Like I said, I never would have anticipated being in a role like this, you never, like, you probably heard my role was like, that's not what you aim to be, but it's just kind of where I happen to be and I'm happy. So just be open-minded.
I think that is such great advice. And Andrew, I'm going to ask you the same question. When you left the Bryan School, did you know what you wanted to do next, or was there some exploration there for you?
So I knew I wanted to use my major, and whatever job I was going to take had to do with my major. So it's starting off too, my first major at UNCG was actually computer science. So there's a little tidbit about how I got into IT too. So when the first company I worked for, Carson DeLosa, I did the accounting part, but I always wanted to explore IT. So I always found myself going downstairs into the IT department and talking to the programmers. Then all of a sudden, my bosses noticed that and like, hey, Andrew, we have something that we'd like you to help us with. We keep trying to figure out what IT is trying to do, but we can't figure out the terminology. Could you be the intermediary between IT and finance? So I was like, okay, that's a really cool role. So now I started working like on really transcribing what IT was doing to the finance team. So to your CFO, I tell them, okay, here's what the projects that IT is trying to do, and here's how they're going to benefit, and here's why the cost, or this is why the cost is so expensive. Maybe we should figure out a cheaper way to do this. And so I'd kind of break down that role by just being an intermediary. So it kind of helped me gain more knowledge in terms of IT, and eventually the applications knowledge. So whenever we went to getting new financial systems, I tended to be out in the front and helping the company assess what type of software packages to purchase. Hence, then I became a really an expert in a platform called Adaptive. And there's so many different new platforms out there. There's Adaptive, there's Tableau, Anaplan. There's so many business packages out there. And I'd say that for you as students, as professionals, as you go into professional life, if you can take one application and really become an expert at it, it will become, it will really can drive your future growth. So my knowledge of Adaptive drove me to Ralph Lauren. Ralph Lauren had just got the package Adaptive, and they asked, hey, could you help us enable it and get it going? And I got Adaptive going for Ralph Lauren. And then moved on to my boss from Ralph Lauren moved on to a new company, Royce 2. And I went on to Royce 2 too. And he brought me on to kind of get Adaptive going again. So that's kind of my focus now. I'm an expert in a system that I can constantly do over and over. And so I've always kind of figured out my role would be taking financial systems and blending it with IT and doing more. And that's what I've always liked to do, and that's where I am now. So I think I kind of worked up to it. It just was just in my background.
I think one of the things that Monica mentioned and you just talked about is the willingness to perhaps not always be super comfortable with what you're doing, but willing to do it, to try it, right? So you made the decision to combo those. In what you all both do now, and Andrew, I'll let you kind of keep going. You talked about your platform that you're specialized in. What are the skills that you find, in financial and with that IT data side of it? What are the skills today that are most critical that you think employees should have?
So really it's an understanding of, first of all, for finance, just how transactions work and all that. And on the IT side, it's really how to build databases, connect that. Because currently the challenges companies face, yes, you do have a large IT department and you could have a lot of programmers, but they don't tend to know the finance side of things and why these calculations are important, why accounting is so focused on detail. And so you tend to be the intermediary between the finance and IT. And that tends to be a big highlight for companies nowadays, is that really finding someone who has got both a focus, who knows finance and also who knows IT. And but my role changes all the time. Like right now, I'm specialized in so many different things. Also, macroeconomic events. So you kind of have to really look at right now what's happening in supply chain, global supply chain, vessels, containers, shipments, and all that. Because depending on where you work, I've always focused on manufacturing companies, and those tend to have a lot of movement and larger supply chains, and those tends to be a challenge, but it's a fun challenge.
Yeah, I would imagine supply chain right now is definitely
Yes.
a challenge and something you're adding skills every day. Monica, in what you're doing, are there skills that, as far as operations and particularly with you with the applications lead, are there skills that are really important to build or to walk in the door with?
Yeah, so I'll be completely upfront. I was clean slate when I got to my new job. I didn't have any background in it. And so it really just comes down to very generally being very adaptive, quick, and willing to learn. And also, I think what's really helped me is just being able to learn more about the business and how it operates. Because ultimately, I work in IT as well, and IT's job is to enable the business to do what it needs to do. So if you understand what the business is doing, it really helps you solution the things that will make them work more effectively and more efficiently. In terms of technical things, I think probably so. I've worked on a few projects and they have these different project methodologies that project managers use to manage their projects. And so I would definitely get insight of that and learning more about maybe by the time some of you graduate, there'll be like 3 different project methodologies because I've already seen like 2 or 3 come in and out, even in my 2 years at Lincoln. So right now, those things, if you want to look them up, are things like agile and waterfall, things of that nature. Just understanding how a project flows and how other teams are working through, because a lot of things that you work on probably aren't just going to be with your team being involved. So you definitely have to understand how other teams are getting things done so you can understand how you fit in that big picture. So probably those 2 things are the biggest.
This is not a question that we had generally discussed, but what you all both just said makes me want to ask this for students. So you both just talked about the importance of not only understanding your role, but Andrew, you talked about macroeconomics, and Monica, you talked about understanding the function of the business. And Monica, I'll start with you on this. But how do you do that, right? Do you put yourself out there and ask other groups? How do you do that? How do you expand your understanding beyond your star job and make sure you're adding value?
It can be a bit intimidating, I'm not gonna lie. These things, like, especially when you're in it real time, you don't want to mess up the flow of a project or be like, that's a dumb question, but honestly that's the only way you are going to learn is asking those things. And they're probably not dumb because I figured out that on specific teams, everyone's very focused on what they know and what they're doing, but they don't know anything about what the other teams are doing, or they have minimal knowledge. So basically, if you ask any question, it's probably going to help out someone else on another team. So don't feel like it's a dumb question. Also, and this is really basic, but we have like a learning management system, and they have things that break down the different lines of business, like annuities, insurance, because if you've ever looked into those things, they're very confusing. So I've actually went and done, there are people in Lincoln that have done trainings on like the basic like knowledge bases of what you need to know about how Lincoln relates to these different lines of business. So that's super helpful. And also just looking at your company's website and just because they really get down to the nitty gritty, like people's attention spans are very short nowadays. So they really get to the point of what they do. So I definitely recommend those few things.
That's great advice. The website is good because they're usually updating it, putting good information out there for their partners. Andrew, how about you? You obviously talked about the research you're doing around global conditions. How do you make sure you're adding value in your role with the rest of your organization?
So it's a lot of reading, a lot of studying, a lot of following what's happening and news-wise. Since it all even at Ralph Lauren, it all begun there too, because they're managing a distribution center there. You have to know your local labor climate. You have to know your available employees, so temp labor market too, market rates, because they all affect your costs. Going on to what I'm doing now is supply chain. So I'm looking at port congestions in different areas in the world, seeing how quick we can get our goods, seeing the benefit of air flying in our goods versus cargo shipping them. Then looking at trucking. So there's so much that goes on, and staying ahead of that just takes a lot of reading. So I'm constantly every day, every morning, I spend some time, a couple of hours, just reading what's going on in the business climate. My coworkers pass each other different articles here and there, like, oh, look look what's happening in this country. So they're always seeing things I'm not seeing. I'm seeing things that they're not seeing. We're constantly exchanging information. So it takes a lot of reading to do, but it's I mean, it's always interesting stuff. There's always something here to learn. So you're always learning new things too.
I think that's great. And that really covers that theme we mentioned about continuous learning, right? You don't walk out of the Bryan School and that's it, you're not finished. There's always opportunity to continuously learn and to educate yourself. Staying sort of on the topic of what you're learning, I'm going to throw this out there to Andrew and I'll let both of you talk about it, but are there skills that a student who is in their undergrad or graduate degree at the Bryan School should absolutely make sure they have before they get into the job market? And one, I'm going to kind of plant this answer, but one that I hear a lot from partners is Excel, right? Just basic understanding of Excel. That's a skill that people don't really think about, but if you can bring that with you. Are there others, Andrew, that you see? And then we'll let Monica, I'll let you, but are there skills, when they finish and enter the job market, they need to make sure that they've, mastered and are able to talk about?
Yes, I'd say SQL. So just database management. If you can just figure out how to read and even like create a database, that's so important nowadays because everything really comes from a database. So if you can build one, or you know how one works and you know what different joins they are, or how the different tables are connected together, that's so important. It's vital nowadays to know that. You do see different roles, different companies. Like I think Tesla, it says that in order for you to really be in finance too, or for the role that they're looking for, you have to actually know how to do database management. So it's a big part of things, and it's becoming a bigger part of finance. As Excel, Excel is great to know, especially when it comes to formula, deep knowledge of that. But Excel is becoming more. It's changing, it's evolving. The different companies coming to challenge Microsoft too. So you kind of have to know that everything nowadays is going to be cloud-based, and cloud-based is different. So that's different platforms you have to learn, and different things you have to know. But all the core assets of all those is just database management. So just knowing that is great.
Great, thank you, Monica. And what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so I would agree, like definitely a general knowledge of Excel and how it works is super helpful, as well as any type of query language will probably help you. There are a few outside of SQL that could help. And then in my role specifically, and especially working in IT, like I said before, a lot of our projects are cross-functional and we work with a lot of other different teams in IT. So a few things I've noticed, like in this very first project that I've worked on in this role, is just knowing what APIs are, how they work, how you connect to them, things of that nature. And then also knowing enterprise architecture in terms of IT. So on a very broad level, that's just knowing, how different systems interact with each other and who's passing off what information, who's receiving it, how are they receiving it. That has been probably like the biggest hurdle I've had to jump over trying to get through this role, is pretty much just learning all the functions of like the different systems and applications that are running in these projects. So definitely recommend and I think it's been a theme throughout a lot of my answers, is just learning about the business in general, like the the business is more than just your team and your role. So just definitely take the time to learn about other systems outside your own.
I think that's true across any organization. Trying to understand how all the things fit together is a really important concept to think about when we go out into the workplace. And if Carrie were here, I'm sure she works in the digital space and marketing. So again, I want to hear if you all echo this, but there's probably not many roles in a current business organization where you can function without that general understanding of how their systems work, how they're, that's really important to learn when you first get on site. Would you all agree?
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. Well, we're going to kind of move on to your personal career paths and sort of keep an eye on our time so we make sure to cover everything. But want to chat just a little bit about something that comes up in conversation and is important for students to start thinking about. But did either of you, and Monica, I'll let you begin, and then have a mentor or a career advisor or someone that you have to support your where you're going and kind of bounce things off of?
I currently don't have an official mentor, but I have lots of unofficial mentors, and a lot of those people reside at my work, and they've worked at Lincoln for a long time. And, they don't always say like they expect me to stay here forever. Sometimes they're like, I hope you're here because I want to be here. But that's not always the right path for everyone, right? And so I think I got that from just the willingness to talk to people and, being open to others' experiences. And I do think that's benefited me greatly in my role. So
That's great. Thank you. Andrew, how about you?
So for me, generally, yes, I do have a mentor. It's my dad is definitely a big mentor in my life. He's always been there, and he's always been there to challenge me. So whenever I felt like giving up or didn't know what to do, he's always there to assist me. But going along, I've had conversations with different bosses, different CEOs, and they've always giving out some tidbit information, which has always been important. I think something we stuck out too. It was 2 years ago. I went to New York to actually talk to the CEO of Ralph Lauren, and he always pointed out something. He's like, where do you see yourself in 10 years? Do you see yourself as a CEO? Do you see yourself as a CFO? But in order to really, he said that in order to really become a CEO, I think we asked him like, what do you do to get there? He always says that, it's always good to know how business works. It means that you're constantly changing roles. It means that you're not just stuck in finance, but you could be in marketing next time. You could be in sales. You have to know the whole business in order to really generally give them a good knowledge of how to drive business growth, which then leads into a role like a CEO. The more you specialize, the more you tend to stay in that area. So if I specialize in finance, maybe I could cap myself out at just being a CFO, but I know in-depth knowledge is just finance. Or do I want to grow and become maybe a CEO, then maybe specialize in more things than just finance, go do sales, go do marketing, do things that people don't normally do. Instead of going straight up, your path might be going, across horizontal. So yes. So it all depends on where you want to be in your long term.
Right, and get out there and meet folks, which leads directly to my next favorite. We've already touched on this, Andrew. You just mentioned it, that you got to go to New York and meet with the CEO. But can you share a little bit about how networking may have impacted your career path and connecting with folks? I know that's a theme, understanding the business and connecting. But are there any specific examples about networking? Sometimes people can have lots of different definitions of that, but would you share if there are any opportunities you took advantage of that helped you with networking?
Yes, so advantages are just getting to know, especially those who are around you, and letting your work, I guess, show itself. So the more the more you work, the more of value you bring to a company, the more value they see in you, and people in your company will probably see that, hey, Andrew's done this and that, and Andrew specializes in this and that. How I came to my role in Royce 2 actually was driven by network. So the vice president of finance at Ralph Lauren ended up moving to Royce 2. And just through working with him multiple times, he's like, hey, I know Andrew. And he asked me, hey, Andrew, do you want to, I've got a role for you. And if you, I know how to challenge you, I want to challenge you in the future. And here's what I want to provide you with. So yeah, so he took me on. I went on to Royce too. And now he says, hey, what do you see yourself in the future as? Do you want to be, chief BI officer or anything like that? Like you just, so there's those people who see your growth and just see how you work, and those people are always important in your life. So some tend to be your bosses. You just tend to be valuable to them and valuable to wherever they go to. They always want to bring you along. So that's always something to always look out for. Those people who just end up taking people with them everywhere they go, and those tend to be some of the best people to work with and some of the best people to know.
That's great. Thank you. I also want to mention, Andrew, you are a former Bryan School alumni board member, longtime alumni board member. You've stayed connected with the school, and obviously you're willing to, stay and present with us and do all of these things for our students and leaving here with their student network. And this is something, Monica, we can talk about too, but you obviously, Andrew, have seen some value in staying in touch and doing those things. So is there value in doing that? Do you find that your educational network, the network you established while you're here and kept in touch with, is valuable?
Yes, it's important. Just being part of the Bryan School alumni program. There we had most people from different sides, and they all did different things, and it was always good to like bounce ideas. When I think a year or 2 years ago, we had a meeting, and we had some team members from VF, and I was working for Ralph Lauren. It was always interesting because you have two competing companies with two different alumni sets, and just talking to them about what their life was like in a different company. It's always nice. And you only got to do that through your Bryan School. I don't think any other way I'd have got to do that. So it is really just a highlight. It's just getting to know different people, getting to know what companies work for and how they're doing, and what the future of their role looks like, things like that. It's always good to bounce off ideas off each other.
Yeah. Thank you. Monica, I promise, Monica set that company spotlight thing without any prompting from me, but I really appreciate it. And again, that kind of starts with the network that you're building while you're here in the Bryan School, whether it's your classmates or the folks you meet at networking events or alumni, like Andrew was talking about. Monica, can you kind of speak to the importance of networking in your career path? And, I know you shared that one story, which is amazing. You both have shared stories about how you got jobs through building your network. What is its value to you to network and kind of stay connected?
Yeah, I know that's a really big buzzword, and probably by the end of your journey in undergrad or grad school, you'll be like, I'm just tired of hearing about people telling me network. But it truly is so important in terms of, y'all probably heard, you can see postings for jobs on LinkedIn, but there's this whole underground hidden job market that you can only get to through a network. So that's really important. Also, Rowling mentioned the spotlight, and essentially that got me into the LinkedIn preparation program, which is specifically designed for people that come out of undergrad or grad programs. So it's a post-grad program, and it's 2 years, and you essentially sit in a role and learn. And after a year or so, you figure out, hey, that's not exactly what I'm looking for. There's some flexibility to find a different job function and learn about something else. And also with that, it's specifically designed for people that are just getting into the job market. So there's an understanding. It's almost like playing your student card. Like you can play your LPP card and be like, hey, I don't know about this, I don't know about that. I want to connect with like such and such leader about this. And Lincoln invests a lot of money in this program, so they're very much open and willing. And this is their investment in their future job capital, right? So they're very much willing to spend all the money and time, not all the money, I don't know about all that, but all the time and the resources that are available to them to invest in you and your growth, because hopefully they want to retain you after you after you graduate from the program. So there's so we have the Bryan School Network, and I also have the network I have with our fellow LPPs. Some of them I graduated from the program this past May. Some of them stayed, some of them left to go to other companies. So it's really important to keep that in mind. Also, one last thing about the LPP program, I really loved it. Definitely, there are lots of rotational programs out there, so I definitely recommend you look into those, because like I said, you're not competing with every other person looking for a job. You're at least just narrowing it down to new job finders. So that's really great. With this program, you get lots and lots and lots of visibility with the leadership that's in Lincoln. And that's just something, at least in my personal experience, that you don't find coming in just entry level, applying to some job and starting in like a P1 position. It just, you really would not get that visibility or that insight from them until you're probably reporting directly to someone that reports to them, or like in some higher management position. So there are lots of advantages in looking to those post-grad programs. So 10 out of 10 would recommend.
That's great. Exactly. So I do see a chat just popped up about where to look into organizations. And I want to give both of you, I know we've shared your organization name and that sort of thing. If just a minute to share, Monica, I know you said Lincoln's more than insurance, but you want to share just a little bit about what Lincoln Financial does, umbrella, the umbrella of their services. And then Andrew, I'm going to ask you to do the same for Royce too, so that our students have an understanding of your business organizations.
Yeah, so Lincoln Financial Group, it is actually, so there's Lincoln Life, which is like an umbrella for lots of different lines of business. So we have retirement plan services, we have annuities, we have life insurance, we have, oh gosh, I am blanking, but lots of, basically when you're, it's all about what you're doing today to benefit you, when you're older. So basically just provide a group protection. So those are things like your dental and your vision insurance. So just lots of things that benefit you now and later that are taking care of you. So
that's great. Thank you.
In layman's terms.
Yes, but it does help, because as students, we don't always understand what, like you were saying, we don't always understand the functions that sit in a business or the general business. So that's also good to learn from folks who are actually doing it. And Andrew, how about you all? Will you share a little bit about your business organization?
Okay, Royce too is a smaller company, but we specialize in consumer apparel, specifically socks. And we license different socks from like different names from different companies. Like right now we've got Saucony and we've got Dickies, American Outdoors. And so we license those and then produce socks based on those companies' names. And that's where our success is. But so you can actually see the design process, and everything else is done through the company. And it's always nice to get to see how everything is just manufactured from the base and designed. So I get to see that whole process, which is something new that I haven't seen before. The company is owned by Okamoto Group, which is like a Japanese conglomerate, and it's a big sock company overseas. And that's also a new challenge I've actually had to come up with, is actually working with different teams who are based in Japan, providing them with different information, and it's been fun. It's been definitely an experience.
That's great. Thank you. And also highlights another thing that the kind of global competency that's required in a lot of roles. You have to be willing to, learn about other cultures, and seems to be a very important thing we see as well in new roles, is an openness and willingness to do that, because business is global, right? You've shared that. So I really appreciate that. So real quickly, because I know I see Ty there, and we're getting to question and answer time, but I wanted to ask each of you, and Monica, I'll start with you. Is there one thing you wish you knew when you were sitting in the Bryan School that you know now that students might, be able to find value?
Ooh, that's a tough one. It's hard for me to answer that, only because I do think there are just certain things that you learn by doing them versus learning about them. But I'm trying to think of, I was like, dang, I wish I would have, learned more about that okay, so I did learn about these things, but it just was covered more broadly and obviously, like I said, you just learn more when you're on the job. But I think just learning more about IT in general and how it works and, software development cycles and testing and, just like very broadly, like these random acronyms and terms are in IT. I wish I would have learned more about that just because I'm not gonna lie, in my first few meetings, I was like, they're speaking like in a whole different language. I have no idea what is happening in this meeting. So just getting acclimated to like the very general IT terms and things of that nature, I think would have been really helpful. I probably could have just, spent a little more time on that. But again, I didn't know I was going to end up in this role. So just something to take into consideration.
Good advice. Andrew?
So for me, the biggest one that I wish I'd just definitely done a lot more of is worked a lot more on pretty much like speaking classes, business speaking, could be business speaking. I should have gone more in depth. I know I took the base version, but I should have done more of that. Because I remember when I worked at Ralph Lauren, I had to talk to 400 associates every quarter and display to them financial information and then break it down to them about what was happening. And that was nerve-wracking. I think everybody in finance just hated it because because you never taught that. You never taught how to break down information to multiple numbers of people in a room and make it fun or make it entertaining and not make it boring. And so that was always like nerve-wracking. Those are the hardest things. So I wish I had spent more time just building that skill.
I think that's so important. And that's also something we hear across a lot of industries is you're going to have to get in front of people. You're going to, especially now, here we are on a Zoom webinar doing it, but practicing that, taking those opportunities in the classroom when you have the chance. And I think that's really good advice as well. And Monica, your circles back around to what we've been talking about all morning is just the idea of continuous learning, getting out there and learning, you coaching yourself and being able to go research things that you have an interest in. Ty, I'm going to look to you to the questions. Can you see the Q&A? I think I can see it too, but we'll see.
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, thank you so much to our speakers and our moderator, Bramley, so far. Like Bramley mentioned, we're now going to enter the Q&A portion of the session. So if you haven't put a question in, make sure to throw it in the Q&A. Also, Bramley, if you could pull up the last slide on the presentation with the QR code.
Okay.
This is the QR code for Brian Gold, which you can scan on your Suitable app to earn points. For more info on Brian Gold and how to activate your account, I'm going to throw a link in the chat so you can click on that for more info. I'll throw that in there right now. Okay, and we have a few.
Can you see the Q? I'm sorry. Can you see the QR code? I can't tell from here.
Are you able to present your screen? I'm not sure that I see it presented.
Okay, I will in just a second. Thanks.
Okay, gotcha.
You guys go ahead with questions. I'll get there.
Yeah. So we do have one question from Jessica. We see, during your college years, have you studied abroad? And if so, would you recommend it?
So I can take that one. No, I did not study abroad. I wish I had the opportunity to do that, but I would recommend that because with the companies that you're going to work with, see, this is the second company I've worked with had foreign ownership. The first company, Carson DeLosa, was owned by a Canadian company, I think. But anyway, that is vital though to know to especially work overseas and work or go study abroad, just so you can know how different cultures work and everything like that is really important.
Yeah, I agree with Andrew. I also have never studied abroad, but I highly regret not doing it because I had lots of friends, both in undergrad and grad school, that did it, and I've never heard a negative thing. You just got to really make sure that you are on track, depending on if you're studying abroad for a week versus a whole semester. You really need to make sure you're setting yourself up to graduate on time if that's what your goal is, and also making sure you have the prerequisites and and realizing the cost, and there are ways to compensate for that if you don't have it right offhand. So definitely just look into other sources of income if that's your case.
Awesome. We have another question here. What is the role of accounting majors in your specific industries?
So accounting is so diverse now. Like so many different things you can do. Both I and my older brother both have accounting degrees, and we've gone totally separate lines. Like he is accounting, so he's the core accountant you'd think of. So he went to become a CPA, did audits, and has stayed in that general role. Now he's the CFO. So for me, I took kind of the opposite track where I went deeper into manufacturing and tried to use my IT background, and then went on to be a financial analyst, and now it's a manager of FP&A. So it's totally separate directions, but it's really just based on what you want to do. Where do you see yourself? Do you like to travel? Then maybe you should do accounting and do specify more in audit. So you can do that. You can travel locally, globally, name it. But that's one way of doing it. If you like taxes and breaking down what government's trying to do here and there, that's also another benefit for companies. The tax policy is big. So it just depends what you want to do.
Monica, do you have anything on that?
I do not specialize in accounting, so I cannot say.
It's okay. We have another question from Christy. A couple really good questions, actually. I just want to note, we are reaching towards the end of the session, so if you have questions, make sure to get them in now. So Christy asked, what are some of the main classes or programs that were the most helpful for your position at your company?
So I did grad school, so I'm not sure how many grad school people are out there right now, but I don't remember the exact course names, I apologize, but I know one was quantitative analysis, absolutely beat my butt, but was super helpful long-term. And also economics was really important because we have, Lincoln's a publicly traded company, and we have earnings calls every quarter, and just knowing how those terms and knowing how the economy works and in big picture really helps you understand those calls and understand how the company is doing and why those things are happening. So those two courses for sure were very helpful.
So for mine, it's I think supply chain management 340. And it's a big supply chain management class, which every business, business graduate takes. So it was really important because I think we did a case study there where for the whole class, you manage the company and you manage production, and based on how how successful the output was at the end of the class, that's what your grade was. So yeah, that was a really important class. I never thought it'd be important, but until now, because that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm kind of trying to build supply in order to meet demand and do all that. So I'm kind of doing it the way the class kind of built it. And so I didn't know it, but it's really important. And it's really important to all companies nowadays, meeting supply challenges with demand and not making sure you impact your costs. So that's always important.
Yeah, I like that a lot.
Ty, can I jump in real quickly? I just want to make sure the QR code is on everyone's screen. Is it? Is it out there? Can everybody see it?
I see it on my screen, if that's helpful.
It is. Thank you, Monica. I know we're at the very end, and Ty, I want to let you wrap up any questions. And when you're done, I would love to share thank yous with our group here.
Yeah, we'll just ask one last question. What is the most crucial thing that you learned while in college? Doesn't have to be academic. It could just be something that helped with your career.
I think one of the most helpful things when I was at the Bryan School was learning how to present and communicate effectively and quickly. I dreaded presenting before I came to the Bryan School. I would hate it. And then by the end, I was doing so many presentations. It was just like, just another day. Like, yeah, I have presentations, it's fine. Like, I'm not too worried about graded. Do I look forward to it? Not really, but it's definitely an important skill to learn, and just doing it more makes so much more comfortable with it.
And for me, I think it's multitasking. You're all gonna do it in college, but I used to load my hours up. I think I used to take like 17 or whatever, 18 hours per semester, just so I could get done faster. But that, and we had to go to different classes, different times, and be on there on time and all that. Multitasking helps so much, especially now where I'm balancing multiple meetings, calendar meetings here and there. And just balancing that in general takes quite a lot out of you. But if you can multitask really well, that does help a lot.
Awesome. Well, thank you again to our speakers, Andrew and Monica, and of course, Bramley, and all of the students who joined us. A couple closing remarks. Our next session is going to be at 10 a.m. and that's going to be all about maximizing your internship search and experience. Also, don't forget about the Back to Business party. The gates are going to open at 5 p.m. at the baseball field. There's going to be free food, t-shirts, there's going to be a photo booth, a DJ. It's going to be a great time. Remember to arrive early because supplies will be limited. And Bryan School students only. So keep that in mind. We're really looking forward to seeing you all there. Thank you, everyone.
I just want to throw in a quick thank you to Ty for helping. Rob, I see you there, and especially to Andrew and Monica. Your insight is so important to what we do, and we appreciate you coming back and sharing it, and a great way to kick off Back to Business 2021. Hard to believe, but thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.